Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info. In 2019, Pilot Theatre toured an adaptation of Malorie Blackman's best-selling novel for young people, Noughts and Crosses. In 2020, they are turning their attention to another hard-hitting piece of YA literature, Crongton Knights by Alex Wheatle, in an adaptation by Imtiaz Hussain. The production will be co-directed by Pilot's Artistic Director Esther Richardson and Corey Campbell, Artistic Director of Strictly Arts Theatre Company, who collaborated on Noughts and Crosses, with music by Conrad Murray, who has led the BAC Beatbox Academy since 2008. I spoke to Esther and Corey during rehearsals for the production at the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry, where it will open in February 2020, and I asked them to explain the story of Crongton Knights.
Crongton Knights is the story of the Magnificent Six, who a group of kids from the Crongton estate who go off on a mission to help their friend Venetia one night. And it's, in a way, a kind of action-adventure story with some fantastical dimensions. And it's about what happens when you sort of take risks, really, and you kind of stick your neck out for your friend, and what the consequences of that might be and how you then sort of deal with those things. But it's very much in the spirit of those fantastic films like The Goonies and Stand By Me, those kind of coming-of-age dramas that have like a unity of time that are set over like a single night or a weekend. And in a way, the experience is what leads the characters to grow up. It's that kind of story, but it's very funny. It's very vibrant. It doesn't shy away from the drama of inner city kids' lives at all, but it's got lots of colours, and also it's got lots of wonderful beatboxing in this particular production, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, it covers quite a few different issues in there, though, that young people might come across, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, well, you've already said it all, Esther. I don't know, it covers all these things, and I think the important thing, like Esther said, the novel itself, Crongton Knights, doesn't shy away from the reality of inner city life, and neither does the play, and neither will we, both with the physicality, with the text and with the songs, and bringing these different crafts together for us, we hope will not only be entertaining but make it raw and visceral and loud, so that our audiences really get an understanding, and for those who actually live it, get a representation of the life that we live in, with a message that comes along with it, always a message.
It's hard to see a story like this about a divided society and not relate it to what's been going on in our country for, well, at least the past 4 years. So are there parallels with what's happening, what the kids can see in our country at the moment?
Yeah, very much so, in the sense that this is a community, first of all, that you could say, you know, it's a fictional universe, but it's a community that's experienced austerity and all the kind of social breakdown that aligns with that. So the kids have got hardly anything. They're in a community that has hardly anything. And even things like there's perhaps fewer police around. There are those sorts of echoes in the story, and the consequences of those things are partly what shape the world that the kids are in. And I think that's unmissable, that resonance. It's kind of it's very kind of clearly drawn, just as one example. But we also have, it's a very mixed group of characters, and there's a girl who's a recent kind of, well, has been a refugee really from Turkey, because she grew up on a town by the Syrian border. So we have an actor in the play who reflects the character in the book, who can speak fluent Turkish and who actually has that experience of coming to this country as a refugee herself. So there are those sorts of parallels too, in terms of reflecting what a British community is in 2020 and trying to honour that and be really sort of truthful about that.
It's a story with all of those resonances, but it should be pointed out that it's Knights with a K, so it's an adventure story, isn't it? It's a typical old-fashioned quest narrative, really, at its heart, isn't it? But going from a novel to a stage piece, did you have to tighten that narrative up to keep it exciting and keep it flowing more?
Yeah, Yeah, totally.
Yes, we did. So this is really difficult to adapt, and it's still in the room. We're still sort of finding the translation to the stage. I think in the end, we almost felt like there were two, partly because Crongton Knights as well as part of a series. So there's a huge world that Alex Wheatle has created. Each book looks at a particular family and a particular character. So there's a lot of backstory, there's a lot of kind of nuances in the world that the audience have to understand. So that's really challenging, thinking about getting that across to the audience, because you can't put literally everything on stage. As is typical with our shows that we've been doing over the last few years, we've got a company of 8 who play everything. But the Magnificent Six mainly only play themselves. They do actually step up and play a few of the characters here and there, but we rely on the actors who play Nestor and Festus to make most of that multi-rolling and most of the rest of the world to bring that to life. We've really focused on the quest story primarily, and we brought that to the fore because that is the story of the kids. So the family story is still in the adaptation, but it doesn't have the same prominence that it perhaps has in the book. It was really hard making that decision, but I think it is the right decision, and it does allow the 6 to tell the story in their own way, and it's allowed us to bring Venetia forward as well, who's a very sort of prominent character like McKay. McKay is the character through whom the kind of the story is told in the book, and he's still really prominent in our version, but we've also brought Venetia forward a bit.
So how did it come about in the first place, this adaptation, and what's been the process of adapting it?
So I guess it started when I read the book. I read the book and I thought it was absolutely wonderful, and I contacted Alex and we had a really nice meeting and really got on, and he really was excited by the idea of his theatre version, was super generous and really kind of understood how pilot works, how we work with young people, how we will start quite a lot of our processes working with young people first before we even really start working with professional artists. All of that ticked all of his boxes in a sense, because he's so committed to youth work. He's worked as a youth worker himself, as well as being a brilliant writer. So we just, it's like when you meet a kindred spirit in a way. He just felt really, he was perfect for pilot, and we were perfect for him in a way. So it was a very lovely, easy project to begin. And then Corey, working with Corey last year on Noughts and Crosses, was so fantastic, and just felt that Corey brought so many things to that piece of work. It would never have been the same piece of work if he hadn't been involved. It just felt very natural to ask Corey if he wanted to co-direct this with me, not least because we're here in Coventry at the Belgrade, which is where he's co-artistic director now, and we're making it here. And I would say that everybody on the team shares roots, very authentic roots, in kind of growing up in working class communities, or would describe themselves to be absolutely working class. So we too, I think, connect on very many levels, and it just was a very natural thing to kind of pursue working together on this project.
How does it work having 2 directors in the rehearsal room? It sounds like there could be some arguments in there, or do you have individual different jobs that you do?
I think because we work together on Noughts in a different capacity, actually, in Noughts and Crosses, but because we've worked together before, that makes it slightly easier. But the exciting part is the disagreements anyway. It's very, very natural and very, very normal to have disagreements, artistically especially. But we trust each other in the way of leaning on the storytelling, and that's the number one principle. We want to tell a clear story, and we want to tell it well. And so regardless of what disagreements there may be, the point is there's a story to be told, and we have to do a service to the novel, a service to the play, and a service to our audience. And we trust each other enough to know that if anything arises, we're going to come to the best solution, A1, with the fantastic storytellers here. That's what I'm telling you, David.
Also, I think Corey's got a very special way of making theatre, and his approach is very, very physical. I'm a real text woman, so that kind of that marriage is very, very useful in the room. Corey's very experienced too at building ensembles, and very experienced at touring, and all the kind of work that that actually is really important that we don't talk enough about, which is kind of equipping everybody in the team to feel really solid with each other, and really that they trust one another, and really that they with one another, and that whole kind of team spirit that is absolutely crucial to the success of a project like this, not least because it's going on tour. So we have to have a brilliant team ethos. And Corey, I feel like I've learned so much from you in the way that you work and the things that you bring into the room, in the way that you do the warm-ups and all that sort of thing. So I think we see eye to eye. Always got the. You're right. Like it's not that we agree on everything. There's something rich in the kind of exchange, but I think that the fundamentals we absolutely are rock solid on, in terms of why we're telling the story, why we're all here, what we're trying to do, and holding the team and preparing them for what they need to be able to do when they go out there on first night and sock this to an audience. We're 100% on the same page.
Yeah, I suppose the point that I was making was more about how exciting it is to have the different experiences. So, and there's nothing wrong with looking at a page and having two very different experiences, look over it, and then trust one another to say, this is the conclusion we'll come to. That's an exciting process. I agree. In any sense, in any room.
You've got quite a young cast as well going on tour, mostly young cast. So do you have more of a responsibility if you're sending out maybe lesser experienced actors on a tour like this?
Well, I think the responsibility is the same. It's if you're sending people out on tour, the responsibility is the same, and you have to kind of prepare them for that. And also you need a really solid touring team, and Pilot's really experienced in that respect. And we have a really fantastic administrative staff who are very, very experienced themselves of touring. They all went on the road back in the day. But we also have a brilliant team of stage managers. We have a fantastic company stage manager this year working with us, Patricia Davenport, who is absolutely terrific. So those are kind of key roles. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're touring for the first time, it's a very new thing, and it's going to be hard work. You're going to be introduced to the. It's not, obviously we'd love it to be glamorous every day, and it's not that there isn't glamour in our industry, but a lot of it, really it does boil down to a lot of hard work, and those of us who are still in the sector and getting quite long in the tooth now know that. So we're no strangers to the graft that's entailed. But yeah, I mean, kind of managing the expectations of young company members, that's important, and that's something that we take really seriously. But we also always balance our touring teams where we recruit very, very carefully. And so we will have a couple of people at least in any team who've done it before, who can hold to some extent the others at times when it's hard, and at times when, that there hasn't been time to take the last section and they've just got to go on and do it anyway. It's those sorts of surprises that you have to be prepared for the unexpected with touring. That's the reality of it.
You mentioned before about the beatboxing from Conrad Murray, an interesting choice of music, but how does that work? He's a beatboxing champion and he teaches beatboxing as well, so it's quite a high-profile person you brought in to do this. So how does that work with the play?
Big shout out to Conrad every time. How does it work? What do you mean?
How does it integrate with the production?
Okay, yeah, so Esther was speaking about the fantastical. By the way, this is something that we're still really eking out. So we got these anthems. I love that Esther called them anthems because they're absolute hits. They're number ones, mate. So we got these songs that have been created that Conrad has the most amazing workshop and way of developing these songs, and they come together very quickly, but actually he finesses them also, which is amazing. So the fantastical language of the play, the Knights with a K, as you say, and understanding some of the, I suppose, more grotesque characters. So you get like the hunchbackers, for example, and the way they're described in the novel is this very grotesque, almost monster-like energy. Being able to incorporate a musical language that goes, it doesn't stand by itself. It goes with the physical language that we're creating, and then the text then embodies it, it wraps it up. So it's just like a Christmas present, you know what I mean? So give me the iPhone, and then it's in a box, and then it's got some wrapping in, and then maybe it goes into a fancy bag. Let me put it that way for you. So it all kind of seamlessly goes together. One doesn't stand by itself. The beatboxing and the music doesn't stand in any way that it wouldn't in a normal production where you introduce a song or a sound effect or any of those things. We introduce it under the same manners and craft and language as you would do in any normal sense. It's an additional skill for the performers. They're working really, really hard at it. And Conrad's the right person to put it into play. In terms of integrating it, for me personally, I don't think it stitches together in any different way as you would have to introduce music, into a normal production. Yeah. It's just that added physical language that you can introduce when you're actually doing it out of the mouth, out of the body, fully embodying the sound, fully embodying the characters and the grotesque nature of some of the more abstract or fantastical moments in the play. And I think that the beatboxing complements that in a way that a song that just came on couldn't do. When you see them physically giving their boom tea claps, when you see that physically happening, and then add the physicality and the physical CR on top of that, it's like the work was made for it. It embodies the whole point of what we're trying to do with Crongton Knights. It's beautiful.
Well, that's an additional skill that the actors have got to learn within the rehearsal period as well.
Yeah, totally.
We like to keep them on their toes.
Yeah.
Pilot theatre rehearsal. But actually, in all seriousness, it's a fantastic thing. It's a fantastic tool for building an ensemble because they obviously knew they all had to do it when they arrived. It's also really, really theatrical. So it was very freeing for them. And we've got a room of they're so talented, the company on this. I mean, it's actually quite mind-blowing that they arrived, knowing they were going to do beatboxing. But in the first week, it was like, okay, but actually, literally, we're all going to write the songs together. And nobody flinched, did they? Everybody got on it, got on it.
Team of go-getters.
Yeah, and actually, it's really amazing what they've managed to create already. And it's something that we are kind of building that muscle with them every day. So it's something that we re-rehearse every day. We're now working through the play, so we're starting to think about, okay, well, how the songs can sort of work along, like as Corey was saying, alongside the text, where exactly are they coming, that kind of thing, which is a bit like a devising process. And that's really, really joyful. And as Corey says, there's some smash hits in there. I mean, it's really extraordinary, the power of what they've made.
This is another adaptation of a fairly challenging novel for young adults after Noughts and Crosses, based on the great book by Malorie Blackman. What attracts you to work for this type of audience, do you think?
Well, I think that this work is for everybody. So I don't start going, we need to make work for this. I mean, I suppose what I do feel really passionate about is making work for teenagers, or making work for those, let's even say 11 plus, because that's who Pilot makes its work for. But I just feel that there are so many fantastic British stories that just don't get platformed because of the male canon, because of all kinds of ideas about who has the right to tell their stories, which is just, I think, completely bonkers. I also think that Pilot has quite an important working class history as a company, and has a fantastic history, in a sense, giving people their first opportunities to be exposed to an audience on stage. That there are so many amazing performers, writers, directors who've passed through Pilot and, gone on to do extraordinary things. And the extraordinary things isn't the point. The point is that we're here to harness that energy and create a platform for all those people and those voices. So to me, it's a no-brainer that we should make work like Crongton Knights and we should make work like Noughts and Crosses, because those are the issues that are live and relevant to young people, and those are and they speak to the world that they live in right now. And so many revivals of older plays, even though you can kind of create a great lens through which to try and make that relevant to now, why not just tell a story that is set now, or that really is relevant to now, and that really is looking at the live questions that people aged 13, 14, 15, 16 are thinking about, or maybe should be thinking about, as they kind of navigate their way into adulthood.
It's a big risk, though, and a big investment, though, into creating new work in this way, as opposed to, as you say, picking something off that's already created. It's a big financial risk for a small company, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a really big financial risk for a small company. I'm glad you've highlighted that. But But actually, look, one thing I have been committed to my core throughout my career is, I didn't grow up in London. I grew up in the north of England. I am really, really committed to and really passionate to making work out of London. I've chosen to do that. I could have had a different career maybe if I'd taken other opportunities. But I've chosen to do this because I actually really deeply care about it. And I really deeply care that we get to tell and make new work, that regional theatre doesn't just become the preserver of the revivals of Shakespeare or the private lives. Those plays are great. I'm not trying to knock them. But we have to be able to have a space too to explore what theatrical form is in 2020. That shouldn't just be happening in London. That would, to me, would be an absolute travesty. Because if that happens and we see that shift, then there are so many people who are just never going to get the access to the arts and the access to tell those stories. And I'm sorry to say it, but I do observe that shift happening. So I fight with everything I've got for us to be able to have a space to make new work. I think it's really important, and I support and stand with everybody in regional theatre who continues to do that in this climate, because I think it's super, super important for so many reasons.
When I saw Noughts and Crosses at the Lowry in Salford last year, and I was in a matinee audience which was filled with school parties, and they were all absolutely totally attentive all the way through, apart from in the sexy bits when they got a bit lively. But is it hard to get those audiences to come to the theatre?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard at the moment. I mean, God, how long have you got, David? Oh my God. It's really, really hard work, and we don't get it right every time, and it's something that we're learning, but it's something that we remain absolutely committed to doing everything we can to work. I mean, it just feels like everything's stacked against us right now. We've got cultural education stacked against us. We've got the poverty in communities and in schools. Schools have got no money, so there's a whole economic problem because of the way theatre is currently economically set up, that I can't just overnight change with a magic wand. I wish I could. I have to try to work within that economic reality. So that's hard. But also, I think because venues have had so much pressure on them, and I just really sympathise with the pressure that they've had on them. I work, alongside a venue at York, and I know the ins and outs of other venues too. And the pressure on them to kind of meet this bottom line, for various reasons, they have to stand on. It's austerity, basically. They've basically been cut and cut and cut. So they nudge their ticket prices up. All of these things make my life much harder than it should be, really. And what that means is that teenagers and young people get out of the habit. There's no habit formed anymore for teachers to take kids to theatres from schools, and you might have to think a bit more carefully about, can I afford to go to the theatre this month? So in that sort of context, it's harder than ever. It's harder than I can ever remember it being in my career. But we have to stay optimistic. We just have to be more creative. We come up with all kinds of different strategies. We're working within this fantastic consortium to make these pieces of work like Noughts and Crosses and like this. So that's, that kind of keeps me motivated. And we do lots of participatory work, of course. We intersect with teens, artistically in lots of different ways. They get involved in the curation of the programme. They get involved in helping to sort of shape how we tell the story. So we're doing a lot, but if there were certain changes in attitude, government policy, this kind of thing, if there was a little bit more money around for arts and culture, those things might make a really big difference. maybe just putting that out there.
Yeah, a few ifs in there.
Yeah.
So, looking on the bright side, you've got a show here that's there's going to be another hit, like Noughts and Crosses. So what else have you got in the pipeline for Pilot, or for either of you individually?
What's in the oh man, there's loads. We're working very closely with the Conservatoire on their number one, their call out for people of colour to audition, so on and so forth. But we've also got Born Bad coming up with Debbie Tucker Green, written by Debbie Tucker Green. That's strictly arts. Directing with the Birmingham Conservatoire. We of course have the City of Culture 2021 with the Belgrade Theatre. and making sure that the community is completely embedded in the work that we're creating and the work that is being done and the way that the building looks and is represented. So there's a hell of a lot to do, and can't really speak too much about the 2021 program yet, but it's pretty cool. And, you know, I'm sure we'll be on another podcast talking about that real soon, David, I hope. But yeah, it's a busy few years, but let's just do Crongton first.
Yeah. Cool. So Pilot, I mean, we are continuing to commit to this young adult work in a way. And so we've got a couple of commissions. We haven't decided what we're doing next in truth, but it's work in a sort of similar spirit, I would say. We're also quite internationally focused as well going forward. So, for example, one of the stories that we've commissioned is actually an Australian story, which is really, really exciting. So we're kind of exploring how we might make that happen at the moment. We've also been doing some really exciting work that explores how immersive technology might work with theatre. And we had a hit last year with a small piece, actually, that used VR, but that ended up at Tribeca Film Festival. So shout out for Traitor VR, which was led by Lucy Hammond, our amazing projects producer. So we've got some more work like that we're going to be developing over the next sort of 3 or 4 years in partnership with other organisations. And those pieces also explore stories that are really contemporary and really relevant, and that might look at things like how technology is affecting us as human beings, and kind of explores questions around the future. All of those things that we all think and talk about daily, because we know, all of us, don't we, that we sort of face these big challenges like climate change, and that we're leaning into those sorts of bigger questions, really, which actually all our work does in some way. So that's really exciting.
That was Esther Richardson and Corey Campbell, co-directors for Pilot Theatre of Crongton Knights, which will run at the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry from the 8th to the 22nd of February 2020, before touring to York Theatre Royal, Brighton Theatre Royal, the Lowry in Salford, Derby Theatre, Lawrence Batley Theatre in Huddersfield, and ending at Theatre Peckham in May. For more information, see pilot-theatre.com. You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.